Hello everyone, this is the weekly H panel on UMD Media. We are live online and we'll be broadcasting this as well at HBS, Horn Broadcasting Services in Tigray and the Horn of Africa. Today we'll be talking about what happened on Thursday, September 7th in Maqala, Tigray. Peaceful protest for change in Tigray and the administration's brutal response. That's the topic for the H panel today. I'm happily joined by Isaiah Sailamariam, Mercy Kidan, and Mehratab Zebrabruk. Gentlemen, welcome to MD Media's H panel.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Professor Gitach.
Great. So we'll start with the usual first segment of the show, the highlights of the week. What stood out for each one of you? And let's start with Mercier on this segment. What stood out for you? What were the highlights for you over the past 7 days?
Obviously, for those of us who are focusing on issues related to Tigray and Ethiopia, the big highlight would be the peaceful demonstration that was planned on Thursday last week or this week, and how the government or the administration responded, the Tigrayan administration responded to the peaceful demonstration. So that's a big highlight for me. What was new and outstanding was the fact that the call for peaceful demonstration was well received by the people in Maqala, the capital city of Tigray, and most importantly by the youth and key sections of the society, including the veteran fighters of Tigray Defense Forces, those people who are internally displaced from currently occupied by external forces, those areas that are currently occupied by external forces. So those people were very much interested in joining the peaceful demonstration. The youth in Maqala were very much interested in joining the peaceful demonstration. And how the government responded was beyond my expectations. We knew that most dictatorial regimes will try to prevent peaceful demonstrations as much as they can. I didn't expect a Tigrayan administration to go to this level to prevent Tigrayans from expressing their views in a peaceful way. I didn't expect such a violent measure. It was very violent and brutal the way the government acted. What stood out for me was how the youth responded. None of them showed any violence. They peacefully obeyed the security forces. That was I really appreciated that. And from what I heard from the political leaders of the planners of the demonstration, this movement is just starting. It's going to continue until an overall regime change or radical change comes to Tigray. So what stood out for me is how the youth acted very peacefully and how the security forces by the regional administration acted brutally. So that's what I could say that stood out for me.
Thank you, Mercier, for that. Mehratab, what about you? What were the highlights for you?
Yeah, thank you. As we all know, the last week, the big news is what happened in Maqala regarding the planned peaceful protest, which is the subject of our discussion today also, of course. But in addition to that, I've been following the Eritrean youth protest in various cities throughout the world. The youth association or a civic movement called Brigade Mohammedu they have been holding very successful rallies all over the world in different cities. Uh, they they did the same yesterday in Copenhagen and some couple of cities in the US also. Especially what happened in Copenhagen was kind of similar to what happened in Meghalaya yesterday or a few days ago. The police brutally cracked down on the protesters, and some injuries were sustained by the protesters. But in couple of or three cities, I think in the US, they still successfully disrupted. Most of these protesters are aimed at disrupting the PFDJ or the Eritrean government festivals, which are aimed at raising funds for the regime in Eritrea, and they did successfully in three cities, and uh, it's been 10 days now. I think the biggest one that we have seen was also all over the news was in Israel, because Israel was supposed to be the stronghold of PFDJ, and the brigades Hamadi used were also considering not going out in protest because they knew that the PFDJ members would come out in big numbers, and as we have seen, they may come with a very harsh measures against the protesters. But they did protest, and it was a big clash. Israel news were reporting that they have never seen this kind of altercations between protesters. They said in 20 years. I think it was a very big event, and that's what stood out for me last week.
Thank you, Marathon, for that. Isaias, again, the same question, the highlights of the week for you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Getachew, for the opportunity. I think there are two things that are very unique and that stood out for me. I think the first one is the peaceful protests, which I'll be talking a little bit later, but also the accountability issue regarding the genocide and this war crime investigation and the upcoming UN voting, and how the Tigray government turned a blind eye to that process, even though the diaspora has been working hard to hold the genocide perpetrators accountable. So unfortunately, I personally I did some interview very recently through Kim Soyani to get the public attention, especially the Tigray administration, so that they can take proactive measures, probably write a letter or show their uh, support of the international and independent investigation. However, I have not seen any reaction from the Tigray administration. Apparently, I can suspect why. Obviously, uh, so that's one of the major highlights. And unfortunately, in about 2 days or 3 days, the UN, most of these UN member states will vote to suspend or extend the ICRE, the ICHREE, the branch of UN entrusted with or responsible to investigate the atrocities in Ethiopia, especially in Tigray. So, that's one of the most crucial aspects of this week. And I think the Tigray administration did not take any action. As you can see, the European Union agent or representative from Human Rights Watch, Philip, uh, also reminded the Tigray administration to pay attention because time is ticking, and once the ICRI is killed, there's no way for Tigrayans to seek justice. So after losing almost 1 million Tigrayans, the Tigray administration, through the Pretoria deal, I think they believe that the transitional justice system, which was established through the Article 10 of the Pretoria deal, will bring justice to Tigray, which is it's impossible, practically impossible. To go a little bit technical, the the transitional justice is it consists of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, African Union. Some of these organizations were preaching genocide against Tigrayans. Actually, they turned a blind eye, and some of them were tweeting that this is a law enforcement operation against to preserve Ethiopian unity. So basically, these people and institutions will be investigating the atrocities, and in that process, not only will they free themselves, actually, they may turn back and try to accuse Tigrayans of committing genocide. Actually, so you'll see that. So that's the most shocking and the most disturbing. It's something that kept me sleepless for the past several months. So I think that's the biggest concern. That's the highlight of this week. And so far, the Tigray administration did not respond, and they're not doing anything to support the international investigation, unfortunately. So obviously there's a gap between the diaspora, what the diaspora is doing, and the Tigray administration. I think everything is in consideration of political gain and political benefit. So that turns a blind eye to justice. And the second, obviously, my colleagues already highlighted that the peaceful protest and how the Tigray administration reacted, which is completely unacceptable and it's illegal, actually, because these folks did not violate any law, which I'll be talking a little bit later, and also I will try to mention some of the laws and the facts. Actually, was there any fact to claim that they violated a law? So that's something I'll be talking a little bit after the second segment, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Sayas, for that. It's important to highlight, like you said, the big contrast between what the administration is doing in terms of the peaceful protest versus what they should have done in terms of the International Commission on Human Rights Issues on Ethiopia, which was a critical tool. In fact, this was a time where there could be a lot of push in terms of expanding its mandate as well to investigate Amhara, Oromia, and the rest of Ethiopia, with Tigray at the center of everything. So let me start with you for the topic of the day. So one of the things that happened before the protest was this letter from the Peace and Security Bureau of Tigray Interim Regional Administration. This was written by the head of that bureau. He's General Fisa Kidanu Fanta. So one of the things, the highlights of that letter, if I may summarize it, is this is an illegal protest and stop it. That was the message, and this was addressed to the commanders of the different fronts in Tigray, and including to the zonal security officers. And UMD Media had a chance to talk to him to explain and to answer our questions. So there was a mention of this color revolution, all that, and so on. So Isaias, as a student of law, can you help us and our viewers to understand what kind of law or rule did this protest stand against?
Okay, so that's a very critical question, Dr. Getachew. Thank you very much. So I think before I dive into the law and the international standard of peaceful protest, I think it's very vital to mention some of the facts, that are available publicly, actually. So some of the information is already publicly available, and the court of public opinion already decided who did fault, apparently. So first, I think some of the questions raised by the protesters they were demanding inclusive political landscape in Tigray, because to begin with, this interim administration was established after the Pretoria deal, right? This is the child of the Pretoria deal, the administration itself, right? So when the Pretoria deal was signed, apparently only one single political party signed, the TPLF signed, not the Tigray administration. That's the biggest problem. So from the very beginning, from the get-go, it was not inclusive. Only one political party signed the deal, not the Tigray administration or government. Actually, TPLF signed the contract That's the very first problem. And then there is the question of fundamental political question, reform, which they referred as Surbakol, which is subject to different interpretation. Surbakol is, I mean, in principle, I think is fundamental political reform, right? Changing different form of how the politics work in Tigray, because in the past many years we have suffered a lot, multiple attacks. Uh, since the Badime war, for example, we lost more than 100,000 people. We also lost land, and after that, multiple incidents happened, and nothing really changed, right? So, and now after all these, when people raise question to get some of these questions answered, uh, the administration responded violently, and the other question raised was effort to restructure effort to make it a truly public endowment, right? So there are a lot of rumors surrounding effort that has been embezzled by public officials for many years, and now some of these political activists and journalists were asking to make some reform and how the effort is handled, because the effort was donated by the West. These multi-billion-dollar companies should be held by the people of Tigray instead of like being controlled by a single political party and some officials. That was the other question raised, and also the protesters were demanding the separation of political and public institutions. Right, the TDF and the police should not be used for a political purpose. Not both sides. TDF, these protesters were asking the administration to not politicize TDF, make it a truly public institution separate from political influence, and also they were asking for the TDF veterans to be treated well after losing their lives and their eyes and legs amputated, and some of them are begging on the streets of Malala and other places, right? So these are some of the questions raised, and unfortunately, there's no public safety as well. Zodu was killed on the broad daylight, and some other women and girls were also raped even after the Pretoria deal. The administration is not or is not able or capable of ensuring public safety, and this was the other question raised during that protest, right? And the administration through the police commissioner, I think the Malala police commissioner, Waldai Baucha, I guess, he said, we saw these people carrying Lumut Bandira or Lumus Bandira, or the plain flag, which is the old Ethiopian flag without the star, right? So there's no factual evidence that they were carrying this Lumut Bandira. I haven't seen it, honestly. I saw multiple videos of the protest. We don't see that at all, and factually. And second, is it a violation of a law to hold a flag, even if it's not permitted to wave that flag? I think they don't deserve to be assaulted and beaten deadly, in such a way, and that's very unfortunate. And also, these officials are claiming that there was an attempt to dismantle the government or coup or whatever, but I haven't seen any of these protesters carrying guns, and the only thing we saw on the video, like objectively, was they were protesting. They were asking these fundamental questions. So I think this has to be considered first. I think the standard, it's very obvious, Dr. Getachew. So first, the Tigray Constitution, Article 10, Article 10 of the Tigray Constitution, and also Article 30 of the Federal Constitution, and also Article 20 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, and also ICSER, the International Convention for Civil and Political Rights, ICSCR. They all allow peaceful demonstration and assembly without any restriction and burden. The state could not make people's rights to demonstrate burdensome. They can't put different standards. They can't restrict in any way. So every citizen has a right to demonstrate and ask or question the government of its activity, especially in times like this, where when the people of Tigray are starving, 40% of Tigray's land is still controlled by the enemy. There's no public service. As it used to be, apparently, and people are being killed on a broad daylight, right? There's even private prison in Tigray. The president himself, Getachew, right now, he admitted publicly that there are private prisons in Tigray. Like basically, like the Tigray is just acting like it's just complete anarchy, lawlessness, and also there are like basically mafias and cartels, like the cartel type individuals in Tigray. Basically, they can imprison, kill, and torture people if there are private prisons. It's very shocking. So, in that scenario, how is it a crime to question all this publicly? So, I think this is one thing we should know. And also, based on this, the laws that I mentioned earlier, the only responsibility the protesters have is just to notify the authorities of the planned protest, the place of the protest, and the time of the protest. That's it. That's the only thing they should do. So they should simply notify we're holding protest in such and such place on such and such time. That's the only thing they should do, according to the laws that I mentioned. So the place they conducted the protest is Romanat, Godana Romanat, right? Romanat Avenue or street. So that place is historically it's a place where there are music shops and very loud area, right? So the protesters, the speaker. I mean, honestly, it's not a source of nuisance, or they can't disturb people because it's a public place. It's in the middle of the city. There are music shops and it's a very loud area, right? That's one fact. Second, protesters are not permitted around hospitals, for example, because there are patients and etc. Right? So there are certain places where you can't hold demonstration. Right? The place where the demonstration took place is completely fine, and also factually, there's no security concern. Of course, Tigray has been in a very brutal war. We're still, surviving. However, the administration, the Tigray interim administration, has more than enough police to take care of that event. Actually, after the protest, so first the Tigray administration say that we don't have enough police, that's why we don't allow that now, and also we have some security concerns. And then after the protest took place, the number of police outnumbered the number of protesters. Actually, the funny thing, there are more than enough police. There are many TDF forces like sitting and chilling it in every corner of Tigray, Ma'ala. So they have more than enough police. Actually, that's a lie, right? So the shortage of police is a lie, complete lie, because of what I say there. So that's not factually accurate, and I think all these have to be considered. And after that, of course, as you also they tortured, beaten the protesters, and some of them are still languishing in prison cell, including Zema Tsagab, a lawyer and a journalist by profession. So he's still in prison. Some of them were released, but Zema Tsagab and some other folks were still in prison. And that happened because the judge, I think, the judge ruled that all of them should be released through a 10,000 bail. However, after they took the letter and went to the other police commissioner's office, he was not there. Actually, he disappeared. He disappeared and said, "I'm busy doing something somewhere." So basically, there's no good faith. Obviously, or bad faith. There's bad faith, obviously, because they wanted to stay in prison for the weekends for 2 days. So the police commissioner disappeared, unfortunately. So these are some of the things that are like very very disturbing. Actually, I never expected Tigray to be like this after all we've been through, but unfortunately, we have to deal with all this. And I think these are my reflections, Dr. Getachew. I'll come back to some other questions.
Thank you, Isaias, for that one. So maybe we have to update our viewers that at least in the admission of this Commissioner Waldai, he mentioned they detained 49 people, and different sources are pointing out that the number of detainees could be as high as 150 or 160, and some of them were released yesterday, Saturday, including those who were beaten up brutally by police. You mentioned Demas, a journalist and a lawyer by training, who was, I think, also the university professor at Aksum University. And we know the political leaders, Hayal Godofai of Salsa Wayane Tigray Party as chairman, Dejan Mazgabu, Tigray Independence Party chairman, Amdom Gabraslasa, a newly elected Arena Party chairman, and two of the senior top leadership at the Baitona Party, Congress for Great Tigray Party, Kubron Berha and Kadana Amana. All these still in jail, even after the bail verdict from the court on Friday. Mercy, let me go back to you on what we learned about the aftermath and during the protest, the response from government and the other leader of a social movement, a civic movement. You have been following this closely. So what is your take of what happened at Romandat Square on Thursday?
All right. Thank you for the opportunity, Getachew. One thing I would like to say is, as an organization, Solidarity of Tigrayans for Independence and Liberty, or as we are typically known, SIMRAT, has been working with the three political organizations closely, collaboratively, to bring democracy in Tigray. And we have been very supportive of this initiative, this Alliance for Radical Change in Tigray. We have been supportive of that from the beginning, and we have been following it very closely. The first thing I think we need to answer is what was what initiated, what was the reason for these political parties to take this initiative? The main reasons are the predicament that the people of Tigray are facing. And I can list them here because it's very important to know what they are and why this Alliance for Radical Change was established, and also this peaceful demonstration was called for. The predicaments are, number one, after the signing of the Pretoria Agreement or cessation of hostilities deal, it was expected that the territories of Tigray would be returned to Tigray, and all external forces would remove their forces from Tigrayan territories, and those people who are displaced out of those territories will be returned. This did not happen. So these political parties have been asking for a long time what the government or the interim administration of Tigray is doing about it. And, including ourselves, the political parties, we knew that the interim administration was not doing what's expected from a Tigrayan leadership. So that's one major reason for beginning this movement for change. The second is the fact that we have over 1 million displaced people in Tigray, in those cities that have been devastated by war. And the people are supporting these displaced Tigrayans, brothers and sisters. And we do not believe that the regional administration is doing what's expected from it to return them. And third is there is a major security concern in Tigray, in the areas where the regional administration has control. The security situation has been deteriorating, and people are finding it to be challenging to do their daily routines. People are being killed, robbed in a broad daylight, killed. Women have been raped and killed in broad daylight. And some of these crimes are being committed by people who are part of the system, who are part of the regime. So this is another key reason for starting this initiative. In fourth is the fact that Mr. Getachew Reda, the president of the interim regional administration, promised some reforms, and none of those reforms are not happening. One of them being the separation of state and party, political party, TPLF, has fully integrated its bureaucratic administration with the state, and there's no separation. He promised the separation of party and state, but that was not happening. As a matter of fact, it was intensifying, and there is a network of businesses and smuggling of people, materials, and some mines and minerals from Tigray through this network. So this was another major issue. And the fifth is, and a very important one, is the fact that TPLF controls the key resources of the people of Tigray, namely the Endowment Fund for Rehabilitation of Tigray effort, which is built from the popular struggle, from the resources and capital that the popular struggle has produced, and since then has been controlled by TPLF. This is a multi-billion-dollar organization which should be owned by the state of Tigray, representing the people of Tigray, not by a political party. As a matter of fact, from what I understand, the constitution doesn't allow a political party to participate in this kind of businesses. The other organization is REST, Relief Society of Tigray, which has been collecting financial and other kinds of support from international organizations and has been distributing it through to the farmers of Tigray. And there, we know that, and every Tigrayan knows that this financial support that's gathered from international organizations has been embezzled and not reaching the people. So we believe that this organization needs to be, or the political parties who call for this radical change, believe that REST needs to be integrated into the government, the international interim regional administration, and should be controlled by the state as an agent of the people of Tigray. So these are the main 5 drivers for need for change. So this Alliance for Radical Change will continue. We are part of it as Simret. We are supporters of this movement, even though the political parties are leading it. And our understanding, our agreement is that this movement will continue until these 5 major changes happen. Until the territory of Tigray is returned, all the external forces from Tigray are expelled out of Tigray, until the internally displaced people have returned to their home, until security has been normalized in Tigray, until the resources of Tigray are returned to the people of Tigray. Our drive for change will continue and will intensify. The peaceful demonstration is just the beginning of it. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy, for that. Miratab, in addition to the response that we are seeing everywhere, one of the things that happened actually from the atrocities and abuses, we have to highlight this is Demas Tsagab with the journalist we mentioned, who is still in detention, and he was supposed to be at least brought to the court within 48 hours, but over 72 hours have passed, and we are not sure what and how he's being handled. That's a journalist, and the second journalist that was released yesterday, he wrote this, including posting the abuses, the bruises, and the attack, the brutal beating by police on his body. And he mentions, among other things, telling the world about this, what he called the seal of the rule of jungle on his body, would hopefully save from such attacks by security forces happening in the future. With that in mind, and we saw a couple of letters coming out from the Justice Bureau as well. So Mihratab, on what you saw in Magala, and after that, and the response from the government, what is your take of all this?
Yeah, thank you again. So after the signing of Pretoria cessation of hostilities, the government, the temporary or interim administration of Tigray, was supposed to deal with external forces to secure Tigrayan interests. But 9 months now, we have seen that this administration, which is led by a single party from behind, cannot achieve all those things that were signed in Pretoria. We have seen they have taken like 4 months to establish the interim administration. Even after establishing the interim administration, we have seen 5 months without even hearing from them about what is happening in regards to the securing the territorial integrity of Tigray, returning back the IDPs to their homes, or all the other things that were expected to result from the Pretoria Agreement. As the president himself admitted yesterday, he's been missing for 5 months without even telling us what's going on behind. So these opposition parties have clearly seen that nothing is going to change if we don't change fundamentally the working process of the interim administration, which is led by a single party. And that's why they called for these demonstrations, a peaceful demonstration, of course. But the interim government plus the ruling party, TPLF, have responded with very surprising brutality against the youth. From the beginning, what they did was first to paint this call for demonstration or peaceful demonstration, to paint it as something it is that is going to be not peaceful, or something that the parties did not say was being aired by the government news agencies to paint it negatively. And thereafter, the government moved on to securitize the issue by claiming that there are external forces that are driving this protest. They have intelligence information that explosives have been transported into Tigray to be used in the day of demonstration, and all these things. And as we have seen, the security chief came out and called all the security forces to act in their respective areas, which was a carte blanche given to the security forces to take measure, whatever it is, to stop this demonstration. In addition to that, in every locality, they have been going to tell the people not to go for this peaceful demonstration. They have been calling meetings on the day of the demonstration. For example, the TDF soldiers that are wounded, they were clearly told not to move on that day, in or out of that camp where they are staying. So they have been doing all effort to stifle this demonstration. And on the day of the demonstration, we have seen while they were claiming they don't have enough security forces to make sure this protest is going peacefully, but we have seen they have flooded the city or the square, Romanat Square, with security forces, as Isaiah said rightly, more than the protesters. And this is hypocrisy. So it was clear this protest was not favored by the interim administration or the party that is leading. Not only that, they were very much determined to show that this is not going to happen again. That's why we have seen all these brutalities. So people don't think about doing the same thing in the future. This was a warning to every youth in Tigray that if you think to air your grievances, if you think to do anything against the government or the ruling party, this is what is going to happen to you. And I don't see this as only disturbing or making sure the peaceful protest is not happening, but also making sure any future such thing never happens again. And that's why we have seen a very heavy crackdown on the protesters. And some of them are heavily injured, especially Zemah Tsagab, who is still in jail. And people are saying that they are keeping him in jail until he recovers because his wounds are so bad, and they don't want people to see what the police have done to him. And it makes sense to me because he's a journalist, a very peaceful person. Everybody knows Zemah Tsagab. I don't think there is any special case against him to hold him for such extended period, while he is also being denied medical attention on top of what they did to him. And the other person you showed us here, Maharik Husai, he really wrote it very elaborately. I think this guy, you have brought him, I guess, in to UMD before, and we have seen what these youth were doing during those 2 years of struggle. They paid heavy prices. They have gone through very difficult time to make sure that struggle succeeds, and this is what they have been being paid by the interim administration. So, in all, I think this crackdown is not just stopping this demonstration that was planned, but it is a warning to any future demonstration, to the youth of Tigray. If they think to do the same thing, this is what is going to happen to them. And I am happy most of the people who were detained in the prisons are coming out very strong, very high-spirited, and defying whatever the government is trying to do against the Tigray government. So I really want to salute them. I really want to thank them because they are paying the price for most of the youth. They have raised the questions of the people. Their questions were what everybody has been asking. This government have tolerated protests by the TDF members who are wounded because the questions they are asking, they can simply transfer the claim to international organizations or to the federal government, because they would say, we don't have the funds, we know your problems, but the international government or the federal government is not helping us. But this protest was questioning to the handling of the security in Tigray, to the handling of all the Pretoria Agreement in Tigray by the interim government itself. Those questions were directly needed to be answered by the interim government or by the ruling party. That's why they came very heavy-handed against the protesters, I would say, Professor.
Thank you, Merata, for that. I think there is a lot to be said and to be shared on this topic, but we will go to maybe to the last segment where how you see this playing out, given what Merata just said. Most of those who were brutally abused and harassed and beaten up by police, they are sharing their stories and they are saying this will be continuing. But then, what is the government learning from this? Maybe one of the things that I want you to share is what the Justice Bureau wrote. So a couple of letters written this week. One is to the same office that wrote that warning the Peace and Security Bureau of Tigray, and the other one is to the Police Commission. So it was talking about 3 points. One is about the 48 hours, and they didn't seem to care because Zema Tsegab is still imprisoned more than 72 hours. And they are also, this letter is talking about as well family visitation and medical treatment as well. And the second letter that came yesterday is about establishing an independent inquiry committee. And the Justice Bureau is asking the president, that is Getachew Reda, to establish this committee and also ensure accountability, look at the origin, progress, process, and implementation, or anything that happened in relation to the use of force by the security forces and so on. So the question is, does this give any hope, if to you? So let me start with Isaias, with what he saw here and with everything that might happen in the coming days and weeks. Isaias?
Thank you, Professor Getachew. So first, I think I saw the two letters from the Justice Bureau, Fatih Bureau, and also the demand to establish independent inquiry, the committee, to deal with such issues. But I think one thing we should focus is, even if there are individuals who are committed to justice and fairness, and I think what is important is we have to have institutions. So in Tigray, we don't have institutions. So if you don't have an institution, even if there is a very committed person, very skilled, in good faith, and it doesn't really matter because that person will be swallowed by the majority who are around him, right? So we don't have an institution. So that's a major problem. For the past many years, we built only strong political parties, not strong civic institutions. So unfortunately, in America, when Trump, violates the law, the institutions will take care of him. He's in court now, right? Some of his colleagues, his friends, are being sentenced. Actually, they're found guilty, right? So that's because there's institution. You see, so in Tigray, we don't have institutions. We have a strong political organization, especially TPLF, and unfortunately, some of the people that I know, including people who lived in America for 40, 50 years, like even people who came to America before I was born, they voted for many American presidents. They protested and they did everything. They enjoyed democracy, and when it comes to Tigray, they have a different standard. They tell you, "Oh, we don't need that. This is not the right time." Blah blah, etc. It's very unfortunate. Actually, you need cooperation. You need togetherness in time like this. Actually, when we're struggling, actually, this is the right time actually to have different voices to work together. Unfortunately, it's completely opposite. So I think this is one thing we should be very aware of. And I think the other thing is, like Merasi, I mentioned, mixing of institutions. The political and non-political institutions are mixing. Some of the people, the colonel and these police commissioners, apparently are members of the TPL. Unfortunately, it's very clear. So it's a public knowledge. I mean, you can't hide it. So, which means if you have a strong political opinion, if you're very loyal to some cause or agenda, unfortunately, that can interfere with what you do. Unfortunately, that's a reality. In Tigray, there's anarchy, like you mentioned earlier, and the people are asking to free themselves from that and to live peacefully, right? That's not happening. And I think some of I was reading some of the comments and two questions from I think one from Janet Jones and Muller and Gal Tigray Adwa. So I will address these questions because they're very relevant. So one of the question is food. Our people just need food. We don't need. We don't care who is in power. So I think we have to address that. So regarding food, so I was part of the panel who met uh, myself and some other Tigrans met Mike Hammer about a month ago in San Diego. So during this public conversation, some of the people asked him, "So our people are starving. What is America doing? Where are the food? So why don't you help our people?" And he said, "Well, the food we sent has been sold and looted by, including officials and some other people in Tigray." So that's what he said, and I heard him. And the State Department's doing investigation, and they have satellite information from satellite and witnesses and everything. They will probably release what happened to the food. A lot of it's not just some few $1 million. It's a lot. So basically, the officials are stealing food and selling them. USAID oil and USAID wheat. The food has been found in different shops. People selling it. So if this is happening and people are starving, how is it a crime to question this? Because people are starving, and we want to make sure that everything is delivered to the public. And the other concern is the tragedy around the accountability. I don't know if you have the picture during the during the Pretoria deal. I think prior to that or after, I guess I don't remember the exact time, but the Minister of Justice of Ethiopia and the TPLF agreed. They signed an agreement, and they said they freed TPLF. TPLF is not accountable for anything, and they're freed. In return, the Pretoria deal was signed, and they freed themselves by making a deal with Abiy. There not going to be any criminal prop against them. However, when it comes to the public, the 1 million plus Tigrayans, the investigation will be handled by the transitional justice system, which is Abiy, the perpetrator, the person who is responsible for the crimes. You see the different standard? So you free yourself, and then when it comes to the investigation regarding the public, it'll be handled by Abiy's institution, which means the suspect will be investigating. He'll be investigating his own crime, basically. That's what happened. So the people have been betrayed, I guess. This is a huge betrayal, and I think as a concern to Tigrayan, I will continue fighting for that. Though I think this is something we should be aware. And the other thing I think very relevant to that is that there's a political bias among even the diaspora. That's what I noticed very recently. The advocacy. So it has to be about humanity, about the Tigray population, about civilians, regardless of your political affiliation. So some of the people are turning a blind eye to these atrocities and to try to be loyal to their political cause, and that's very unfortunate. I think we have to find common ground on issues on human rights and freedom. And these are very basic, universal concepts. So regardless of your political opinion, it doesn't really matter when something illegal, something that violates human rights, it should pertain to all of us, and we have to have common ground, or what we call in Tigrinya, and I have a rabha. So we don't have a common ground on such issue. Some of us, I mean, not all of us, but some. When it comes to human rights, if a woman, an Amhara woman, is raped in somewhere, I will stand with her, apparently, because it's just about humanity. If a woman is if a girl or a woman is raped anywhere by anyone, I'm against that, regardless of who committed it, or again assume it was committed. It's just about humanity. So the same thing happens. So when these people, the protesters, are being assaulted for because of political reason, I think some Tigrayans who are loyal to some political cause are taking side, and that's very unfortunate. We have to find common ground on that, I think, and that's very unfortunate. I mean, there's they're defaming people, name calling, and transmitting false information. That's not verifiable. I mean, including yourself, Professor Getachew, and somebody said some some social media activists. Professor Getachew is honorary doctor, which is very shocking, and everybody knows that you're a very well distinguished and recognized scholar teaching at University of Calgary, and you did a lot of amazing things. So everybody knows that. But this cadre or a person probably paid by someone is trying to defame like even people, respected individuals like you. You see, this is very unfortunate. This is the political culture in Tigray, and we have to avoid that, I think.
Okay, thank you, Isaias, for that. Maybe narrative on the thought of how other entities responded to this, other than the government and so on. We have justice condemning what happened and calling for rule of law, all that. And we have as well, I will show later maybe, but a number of organizations, including the Tigray Youth Network, doing the same thing. And we have also saw the Union of Tigrayans in Europe doing the same thing, and TDRF, the Tigray Disaster Relief Fund, again standing against all these abuses and harassment. So is there anything that you want to share in terms of what might play out this the people, the ruling party, and the government? Meratab.
Yeah, I was very happy that most civil organizations and a lot of diaspora members reacted to what happened. Unfortunately, they have reacted to this because of the brutality of the police, I think. But I wish our diaspora and the civil organizations, most of them who are in diaspora, who have released these kinds of statements, were proactively involved in the internal affairs of Tigray instead of reacting to the brutalities. I think we could have saved a lot. Most of the diaspora and civil organizations, they are not involved in the internal affairs of Tigray. We are united when it comes to external factors, but in our internal affairs, they are most of the time abstain or they stand with the ruling party, and that's very bad. But this time, I am very happy. As I said, though, unfortunately, they are doing this because of the brutality of the police officers. But I am very happy they reacted this way and they condemned the brutality. But this is beyond that. This is, as I said earlier, 9 months, 10 months of silence after Pretoria Agreement, and they should have involved themselves in the internal affairs and pushed the government and be on the side of whoever it is, asking the right questions to the government instead of being the obstacle. So going forward, I also implore the opposition party to engage them further so that we have a united voice for a common ground for the interest of Tigray. So it is very impressive that they came out against what had happened in Tigray, Professor.
Thank you, Meratab. The final word is yours, Merce, again, in terms of what Simrat, Solidarity for Tigray, Liberty and Independence does, and what the opposition might do. So this is the largest scholars group, Justice, releasing a statement in terms of the violent measures taken against protesters. And this was what I mentioned, the Tigray Youth Network doing the same thing, and then the Union of Tigrayans in Europe, and the Tigray Disaster Relief Fund doing the same thing. I'm not sure if I have seen from the largest North American group, UTNA, yet.
Yeah, there is actually, UTNA also released the letter. I have it.
Okay, great. So that is kind of universal reaction, which is very good in terms of the future. Marce?
Right. Thank you, Getachew. Thank you, my colleagues Isaias and Meratab. So I would rather speak about what's the way out of the predicament that we are in, if you are okay with that, Getachew. Um, so as I mentioned, we work closely with the political parties, and we have been discussing about this. And I would like to list the things that the IRA and the political parties can do to bring Tigray forward and save the people of Tigray from the predicament that we are in. I think the number one thing the IRA should do and the political parties should do is uh, establish a council, an all inclusive council that will give an interim body of uh, lawmakers, if not permanent laws, but interim proclamations and other controls, check and balance with the executive body. So establishment of an all-inclusive council is the first thing that needs to happen. What that will do is it will bring all Tigrayans together, including all the nationalist political parties and the TPLF. They should come together and establish a council that includes all political parties. This will allow them to work together and also bring unity amongst Tigrayans and deal with the challenge that we have together. That's number one. So without this happening, these demonstrations and movement for change, for radical change, will continue. We, as Simrat, we are part of it. We support the political parties to continue this movement. The number two is the IRA's stand on the justice and accountability on the crimes on humanity and genocide committed on the people of Tigray. There needs to be a direction and a strategy on how to hold people who committed crimes against humanity, people who led the genocide on Tigray, accountable. And we would like to work collaboratively on that. As Simrat, we have just established a team that will be working on creating cases, identifying all the committers of crimes, listing them, and publicly we will release the document pretty soon when we are done. And also we'll continue to release cases against these individuals and organizations who committed and helped the commitment of genocide and war crimes in Tigray. We hope this all-inclusive government or administration is formed, and we work collaboratively with the IRA on bringing criminals to justice. This is number two. Demand number two. Number one is establish all-inclusive council. Number two is put a plan on holding criminals accountable, those who committed genocide on Tigray. Number three is the return of all the resources of the people of Tigray to the people of Tigray. This is to identify the two major resources. That is the Endowment Fund for Rehabilitation of Tigray effort and the Relief Society of Tigray rest. These two need to be immediately put under the administration of the state, the Tigray regional state, or the Tigray regional administration. That needs to happen immediately. It's late. It's 30 years late, but it needs to happen. So that's number three, demand number three. This needs to happen. Number four is security, internal security in Tigray. So there needs to be an action plan and a roadmap to put security, to bring Tigray to normal. And the other reason we want the council to be formed is for Tigray, for the nation of Tigray, to have a unified vision, a unified strategy on how to take the people of Tigray to prosperity, to peace. So all our politicians need to sit together and plan this and bring consensus about this, bring unity about this. And of course, our politicians, our experienced people, our elders, and every stakeholder needs to have a say on the strategy on how to return our territory and on the final destiny of the people of Tigray. So that's the fifth one. So if these five things, if the IRA is willing to work on these five things, there's no need for demonstrations. They can sit on the table, talk about it, put a plan, and work on it. But things cannot continue the way they are going. We cannot allow girls being raped and killed on broad daylight. We cannot allow working individuals killed by authorities on a broad daylight. We cannot allow our internally displaced people languishing in tents and under different seasons, rainy seasons, and all that, all the challenge. We cannot allow this to continue. We will have to bring change. We cannot allow this to continue. Everybody should support this need for change. Every Tigrayan who cares about their sister, who cares about their brother, needs to say enough. It has to stop. And change needs to come. We are not against anybody. We are for peace in Tigray. We are for the return of Tigray territories to Tigray. We are for the return of displaced people to their home. We are for justice for Zodu. If you are for these things, you need to join these peaceful demonstrations. You need to join this movement. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, everyone.
If you allow me, I have a final say about 2 or 3 points.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So I think maybe as a disclaimer, so not that being a member of any political party is a problem, but just to be very candid, that I'm not a member of any political organization, but however, I support anything that helps Tigray, and I will continue to do that. And also, since GSS was mentioned, and at some point I used to be in the leadership, so I'm not representing GSS. I'm just appearing on myself, and I want this to be very clear. So that being said, my final say or conclusion is that I think what triggered all this is because I think that, like as some my colleagues mentioned, there's been a fault line, and that needs to be revised. So the path that we came through for many years did not work. We suffered a lot at different times, and I think this is very critical, and we can't just ignore and do business as usual. I think there's a fault line, and that needs to be corrected. So the second, there's been a wrong perception about Tigrayans for many years. Tigrayans as beneficiaries of the EPRDF or blah blah, and then at some point, all these hatred and false perception about Tigrayans resulted in genocide. Actually, at some point, I remember I was in high school when Malila Zenawi said that the Interhamwe. So he was saying the Interhamwe. There was 2005. There was election in Addis, and there was protests. Right? If you remember, and he was mentioning about Interhamwe, which is a genocide in Rwanda, right? So, which means the leadership had a knowledge. He was able to foresee back then that there is a potential genocide against Tigrayans. Tigray wada Mekale, Shanta wada Kabale, etc. There was a sign of genocide actually back then, and even he said it actually. He said Interhamwe, and etc. etc. And then, so back then, Ethiopia should have been a member of ICC, International Criminal Court, by signing the Rome Statutes. They didn't do that. If you know, as a political figure, as a leader, if you suspect there's a potential genocide against Tigrayans, you should have been a member of ICC back then, many years ago. We wouldn't have any problem like prosecuting these crimes. So that's one thing we should be aware of. When Tigrayans were defamed, when there was a false narrative about Tigrayans, the then EPRDF and TPLF didn't defend it well. That we paid the price. They didn't defend it well. Media, ISAT was spreading all these lies and misinformation back then. None of this media defended. The PRDF and TPLF were in power. They had a lot of resource. They didn't do it. The Tigrayans paid the price. And post-Pretoria deal, there are multiple unanswered questions, including accountability. And again, there is anarchy, right? Like you mentioned, raping women and killing people in front of, during the day, on the broad daylight. This is happening, and this has to be responded. And I think as a society, we have to stop externalizing problems. We have to look back. We have to see ourselves. We have to reevaluate our dirt actually inside. So instead of externalizing everything, And I think let's be consistent as well. So last time when we were talking about these protesters and what happened to them, so Amnesty International released a report. So stop, violating human rights of journalists and political opposition political groups. So I saw a lot of tweets, and some of them were responding to I think the Human Rights Watch director, Latitia, right? Latitia, and also some other people like this. They were saying that, so you're lying, you're trying to destroy Tigray, blah blah. So people were blaming Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch actually after saying that. Imagine. So we relied on these institutions. These are very reputable institutions. We relied, during our campaign against the Tigray genocide, we relied on them, right? When they exposed about the brutality, what happened 2 days ago, we don't think they're reliable now again, right? So we're not even being consistent. That's very unfortunate. Some of the people who say those are people that I respect actually. So we have to correct that. I think at the end, I appreciate the Tigrayan organizations that took side with humanity instead of political affiliation, and I think I urge some activists to be impartial, to side with humanity, and to avoid political bias when they advocate for Tigray. And finally, I think we have to find common ground on issues that matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for your insight. And I know JSTS also called on another statement for establishment of, I should get it right, it's a position statement on the urgent need for the establishment of an interim regional council and the maintenance of security and order in Tigray. And this was dated, I think, way before, maybe posted on the 6th of September. For those who may be not aware, Tuesday is the New Year, the Giz New Year, and we want to say from UMD Media, Happy New Year. And we want to close our show today with a clip from...
Before that, can I say just one, if you give me 1 minute only?
Okay,
one
just
thing.
take that 1 minute then.
Yes, one thing I would like to say is the day the peaceful demonstration was called on what we call Pagme Kalita, or Ipagamenal month of the Giz calendar, on the second day of the Ipagamenal month of the Giz calendar. Or it was, I think, on September 7th on European Gregorian calendar. That day, not coincidentally, was when the first Wayane started. The first Wayane, which is the first revolution by the Tigrayan farmers and by the Tigrayan people, started on that day about how many years ago? Is it 80 years ago? 80 years ago. This peaceful demonstration and how the regime responded is a turning point in the political timeline of Tigray. The youth are encouraged, as Mehret Ab was saying, those who were detained, when they are coming out of the detention, they are coming out with hope and a lot more energy than they had before. I believe Pagme Kalita, or September 7th, is a turning point in Tigray's political timeline. Going forward, you will see that the youth will be demanding for more rights, for more security, and for more political change in Tigray. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy, for that. And I just want to sign off by playing this clip from the Tigray Development Association, TDA, and hope to see you in another show. Good night from here.
Thank you. Good night.
سلستن سمانين حمشتن
ما توكد مالتون باسكود 73 ማሕበርኩም ማሕበር ልምዓት ትግራይ እንኳን ሓድሽ ዓመት ብሰላም ኣብጽሕኩም ኣብጽሕና እናበለት ወህብቶ ሓድሽ ዓመት ንተምሃሮ ትግራይ ብዝብል ቴማ
50 ቀዳማይ ብርኪ ኣብያተ ትምህርቲ ብዝተፈላለየ ናውትን ምምላእ ዝዓለመም
ኢትዮጵያ ሓዊሶም መላእ ዓለም ዝርከቡ ተጋሩን ካልኦት ቅዱሳትን
ላዕለዎት ኣመራርሓ ማሕበር ልምዓት ትግራይ ሓዊሱ ፍሉጣትን ዓበይቲ ሰባትን ብወነን ብውነን ዝሳተፍሉ
በመራኸብ ሓፋሽን ማሕበራዊ ሚድያ ዩቲዩብን ፌስቡክን
ብቐጥታ ፈነወ ብሚድያ ድምፂ ወያነ ትግራይ
ደደቢት
ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ
HBS
ኤጀንሲ መራኸብ ሓፋሽ ትግራይ
ሚድያ ዛራን ዝመሓላለፍ ናይ $1 ሚልዮን መድረኽ ምትእኻብ ሃፍቲ ኣብ ድሮ ሓድሽ ዓመት 2016 ዓመተ ምህረት
ካብ 4 ጳጉሜን ክሳብ 6 ጳጉሜን ካብ ሰዓት 9 ድሕሪ ቀትሪ ዝሳለጥ ዘይትረፈሉ ቆፀሮ ሒዛላ ማሕበርኩም ማሕበር ልምዓት ትግራይ
ኩላትና ንሳተፍ ተምሃሮና ብምሕጋዝ ተምሃረን መሃዛይን ወለዶ ምፍጣር እጃምና ንዋፃ
ንህንፀት ወለዶ ኩላትና ንረባረብ
ዝስዕቡ ሊንክታትን መእተው ኮድን ብምጥቃም ይሳተፉ ይዛተዩ የወፍዩ
ፕሌጅ ዝግበረሉ ሊንክ
በቐጥታ ንሳተፈሉ ዙም ሊንክ
ዙም አይዲ ማለት እውን ሚቲንግ አይዲ 859 73 ባዶ 4 93 85
መእተው ኮድ ማለት እውን ፓስኮድ 73 22 89
ብተወሳኺ እዞም ሊንክታት ዙም አይድን መእተው ኮድን ኣብ ዝስዕቡ ማሕበራዊ ሚድያታት ማሕበር ልምዓት ትግራይ ከምኡውን ኣብ ድምፂ ወያነ ትግራይ ደደቢት ሚድያም
HBS
TMH
ዛራ ሚድያን
ኤጀንሲ መራኸብ ሓፋሽ ትግራይን ምርካብ ከም ዝከኣል ክንገልጽ ንፈቱም
ባንክ ንግዲ ኢትዮጵያ ጨንፈራ ጋኣዚ 10 ባዶ 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 1 54 38 98 3
ዓለም ለኻዊ ባንክ እንበሳ ጨንፈር መቐለም ባዶ ባዶ 11 ባዶ ባዶ 23 36 6
ባንክ ወጋገን ጨንፈር መቐለ ባዶ 7 7 ባዶ 7 52 30 10 1
ባንክ አቢሲኒያ ጨንፈር መቐለም 30 67 ባዶ 2 88
ኩላትና ንሳተፍ ተምሃሮና ብምሕጋዝ ተምሃረን መሃዛይን ወለዶ ንፍጠር ትብለላ ማሕበርኩም ማሕበር ልምዓት ትግራይ
ማሕበር ልምዓት ትግራይ
Integrate Next Billion AI to give your Samsara cloud advanced routing and optimization capabilities. Navigate through the complexities of fleet